The room was cold, almost unnaturally so. Daniel Carter stood in the center of the circular chamber aboard the orbital station Aegis Prime. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back, but anyone watching closely could see the faint tremor running through his fingers. The air smelled metallic, like the sterile environment of a hospital mixed with something Alina scent that reminded him just how far from Earth he really was. Around him, the members of the Galactic Council sat in towering chairs arranged in a perfect circle. Their forms varied wildly. Some resembled humanoid figures with elongated limbs and shimmering skin, while others looked like living clouds of light or clusters of shifting crystals. Each representative radiated an aura of superiority, their eyes or whatever passed for eyes fixed on Daniel, as though he were nothing more than an insect under a microscope. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "I assure you," he began, his tone calm, despite the storm brewing inside him. "Earth's expansion into these regions of space was not done out of aggression. We are facing challenges at home: overpopulation, resource shortages that forced us to seek new solutions." His words hung in the air, met with silence. For a moment he thought maybe they would listen, maybe they would understand. Then came the response, delivered by a council member named Vorn, whose reptilian features twisted into what might have been a sneer. "Your species has proven time and again that it cannot be trusted," Vorn said, his voice low and guttural. "You invade territories marked as forbidden. You exploit resources without regard for balance. And now you stand here pleading innocence?" Daniel felt heat rise to his cheeks. He wanted to argue, to explain that humanity wasn't evil, it was desperate. But before he could speak, another council member chimed in. This one floated above its chair, a being made entirely of swirling blue energy. Its voice echoed like distant thunder. "We gave your kind a chance to join us as equals. Instead, you act like children playing with fire, unaware of the destruction you cause." The accusations piled up, each one heavier than the last. Daniel tried to respond, but his protests fell flat against the wall of disdain surrounding him. It became clear that this wasn't a trial, it was a sentencing. The council had already decided his fate long before he even set foot on Aegis Prime. Finally, after what felt like hours, Vorn leaned forward, his clawed hands gripping the edge of his chair. "Daniel Carter, Envoy of Earth, you have been found guilty of violating interstellar law and endangering the stability of the galaxy. The punishment for such crimes is execution." The word hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Execution? His mind raced, searching for some way out, some loophole he could exploit. "Wait," he stammered, taking a step forward. "You can't do this. I'm just a messenger. I'm not responsible for Earth's actions." But his pleas went unheard. Two guards, hulking creatures with armored exoskeletons, stepped into the chamber and seized him by the arms. Daniel struggled, shouting, "You'll regret this. Humanity won't stand for this injustice." As they dragged him away, he caught one final glimpse of the council. Their expressions remained unchanged, cold, detached, utterly devoid of mercy. Then the doors slammed shut behind him. Back on Earth, the news broke during a live broadcast. Billions of people watched in stunned silence as footage of Daniel's arrest played across screens worldwide. Laura Bennett, head of the United Defense Coalition, stood in her office, fists clenched as she stared at the monitor. Her jaw tightened when the camera cut to Vorn announcing the sentence. When the transmission ended, Laura turned to face her assistant, a young woman named Rachel Moore. "Did you hear that?" Laura demanded, her voice sharp. "They executed him. They actually executed him." Rachel nodded, her face pale. "What do we do now?" Laura didn't answer immediately. She walked over to the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Cars zipped along highways, oblivious to the storm brewing above them. Humanity had always been resilient, always found ways to adapt and survive. But this was different. This was a direct attack on their dignity, their right to exist. Turning back to Rachel, Laura straightened her shoulders. "We show them exactly who they're dealing with." Minutes later, Laura addressed the world, standing at a podium surrounded by military officers and government officials. She spoke with a clarity and determination that sent chills down spines everywhere. "Today the Galactic Council has crossed a line," she declared, her voice carrying through every speaker, every device tuned in. "They have shown us that they view humanity as inferior, as expendable. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. We are neither. From this moment forward, humanity will no longer bow to tyranny or accept subjugation. We will fight not because we want to, but because we must." Her next words sent shockwaves around the globe. Effective immediately, the extermination protocol is activated. Any threat to our survival will be met with overwhelming force. To the Galactic Council, know this: if you think you can crush us, you are gravely mistaken. Earth does not surrender. Crowd erupted into cheers, but Laura remained focused. She knew declaring war was easy, the hard part would be winning it. Still, as she stepped away from the podium, she allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before. It survived ice ages, plagues, nuclear wars. If the Council thought they could break the human spirit, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Across the planet, reactions varied. In New York, protesters gathered outside the United Nations building, holding signs that read "Justice for Daniel" and "No More Lies." In Tokyo, families huddled together watching the news with wide eyes, wondering if this was the end of peace as they knew it. In rural towns and bustling cities alike, people whispered about what was to come. Fear mingled with anger, and anger sparked resolve. Meanwhile, deep within secure bunkers and command centers, preparations began. Scientists worked around the clock, developing weapons capable of taking on alien technology. Military leaders strategized, planning attacks that would strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. Everyone had a role to play, whether it was building ships, coding programs, or simply staying alive. And somewhere among the stars, the Galactic Council watched Earth's response with growing unease. They had expected outrage, perhaps even rebellion. What they hadn't anticipated was the sheer ferocity of humanity's reaction. By executing Daniel Carter, they had ignited a fire that threatened to consume them all. For better or worse, the galaxy would never be the same again. The days following Daniel Carter's execution were a blur of chaos and determination. Earth was alive with activity, buzzing like a hive preparing for battle. In every corner of the planet, people worked tirelessly, driven by anger, fear, and an unshakable will to survive. The announcement of the extermination protocol had galvanized humanity in ways no one could have predicted. From soldiers to scientists, from factory workers to farmers, everyone understood that their future depended on what they did next. Laura Bennett spent most of her time in the command center, a sprawling underground facility filled with monitors, maps, and holographic projections of alien territories. She rarely slept, her mind consumed by the enormity of the task ahead. Round her, officers moved quickly, relaying updates and coordinating efforts between different branches of the military. General Matthew Hayes, a grizzled veteran with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, stood beside her, offering advice when needed but mostly letting her lead. "We need more than just brute force," Laura said one evening, staring at a map of the galaxy displayed on a large screen. "If we go in guns blazing without a plan, we'll be wiped out before we even get close." Hayes nodded, agreed. "But planning takes time, and I'm not sure how much of that we have." Laura turned to him, her expression grim. "Then we make time. We hit them where it hurts first. Show them we're not just some backwater species they can push around." Her words echoed through the room, sparking nods of approval from the others. Everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity once, and Laura intended to make sure they never made that mistake again, in another part of the world. Dr. Emily Walsh was hard at work in a high-security research lab. Her team consisted of some of the brightest minds on Earth, all working around the clock to adapt experimental technology for use in the upcoming war. The lab was a chaotic mix of machines, wires, and glowing screens. With the hum of computers providing a constant backdrop to their efforts, Emily herself was a wiry woman in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back into a messy ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. Despite her calm demeanor, There was an intensity in her eyes that betrayed her urgency. She moved between workstations, checking progress and offering guidance wherever needed. Dr. Walsh called out one of her assistants, a young man named Alex. We've got the plasma cannons running at 80% efficiency now. Should we keep pushing? Emily glanced at the data on his tablet. Yes, but don't overheat the core. We can't afford any setbacks right now. Alex nodded and hurried back to his station. Emily sighed and rubbed her temples. They were making progress, but it wasn't fast enough. Every second counted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against a clock they couldn't see as she walked past a workstation displaying schematics of AI-driven drones. These small, autonomous machines were designed to swarm enemy ships, disabling them with precision strikes. If they worked as planned, they could give humanity a significant edge in battle. But nothing was guaranteed, not with the councils. Advanced technology, they'll adapt, Emily muttered to herself. They always do. She shook off the thought and focused on the task at hand. Failure wasn't an option. Not this time. While preparations continued on Earth, Colonel Ryan Scott led a secretive mission aboard the stealth ship Shadow Falcon. The vessel was sleek and black, designed to evade detection by even the most sophisticated sensors. Its crew consisted of elite operatives, known as the Shadow Hawks. Handpicked for their skills and loyalty, Ryan was a tall man with short-cropped hair and a quiet confidence that inspired trust in those around him. He stood on the bridge, studying a holographic map of the Zerothian homeworld. Key member of the Galactic Council and one of humanity's most vocal critics, our intel suggests their fleet is concentrated here, Ryan said, pointing to a cluster of red dots on the map. If we can disable their defenses, we might be able to send a message. A lieutenant named Maria Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, are you saying we should attack them directly? That's risky, especially since we don't know what kind of tech they're packing. Ryan gave her a thin smile. That's why we're using EMP devices. We knock out their systems, hit them hard and fast, then disappear before they know what hit them. Maria frowned but didn't argue. Ryan's judgment, even if the plan sounded insane. Still, tension aboard the ship reached a fever pitch. The crew moved silently, their faces set in masks of determination. Ryan stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the viewport as the enemy fleet came into view. Prepare the EMPs, he ordered, and remember timing is everything. Back on Earth, cracks began to form within humanity's ranks. Senator Andrew Meyer, a charismatic politician with a knack for stirring controversy, held a press conference in Washington, D.C., flanked by reporters and cameras. He addressed the nation with a mixture of frustration and concern. This so-called extermination protocol is madness, he declared, his voice rising with each word. We're talking about going to war with beings who are centuries ahead of us technologically. Do we really think we can win? Or are we just signing our own death warrants? His speech resonated with many who feared the consequences of declaring war on the Galactic Council. Protests erupted in cities across the globe, with some calling for peace negotiations, while others demanded immediate action. The division grew deeper as rumors spread about the true nature of the extermination protocol. Laura Bennett watched the coverage with a growing sense of unease. She knew dissent was inevitable, but she hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. When reports surfaced of classified information being leaked to the public, she realized they had a bigger problem on their hands. Someone's feeding them details about our strategies, Laura told General Hayes during a private meeting. Whoever it is, they're trying to sabotage us. Hayes clenched his jaw. Do we have any leads? Not yet, Laura admitted. But I intend to find out. Fast. Unbeknownst to Laura, the traitor was closer than anyone suspected. Captain Lisa Monroe, a decorated officer and trusted member of the United Defense Coalition, sat alone in her quarters, staring at a photo of her family. Her hands trembled as she held the image, guilt weighing heavily on her shoulders. Lisa had joined the Council's cause not out of loyalty, but out of desperation. They had taken her husband and daughter hostage, threatening to kill them if she didn't cooperate. For weeks, she had resisted, clinging to the hope that she could protect both her loved ones and her planet. But as the pressure mounted, she found herself slipping, passing along bits of information she hoped wouldn't matter now. As the reality of what she had done sank in, Lisa felt tears streaming down her face. She had betrayed her people, her comrades, everything she believed in, and yet she couldn't bring herself to stop. Not until it was too late. When agents from internal security finally arrived at her door, Lisa didn't resist. She handed over the device she had been using to transmit data and confessed to everything. As they led her away, she whispered, "Tell my daughter, I'm sorry." Despite the betrayal, humanity pressed on. Factories churned out weapons and ships. At an unprecedented rate, soldiers trained day and night, honing their skills for the battles to come. Scientists like Emily Walsh pushed the limits of innovation, determined to give their side every advantage possible. And through it all, Laura Bennett remained steadfast. She knew the road ahead would be long and bloody, but she also knew that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to persevere, to fight for something greater than itself. As she gazed at the stars through the command centers. Reinforced windows? Laura allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers beyond imagination. But somewhere among those distant lights, she saw a glimmer of hope, a chance for humanity to prove that it belonged among the stars. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Earth would not go down without a fight. The night before the first strike, Colonel Ryan Scott sat alone in his quarters aboard the Shadow Falcon. He stared at a small photo of his wife and son, taken years ago during happier times. His fingers traced the edges of the picture as he whispered to himself, "This is for you, for all of us." Then he tucked it back into his pocket and stood up, steeling himself for what was to come. The plan was risky, almost reckless. The Zerothian fleet was massive, their ships bristling with weapons capable of obliterating entire planets. But humanity had one advantage: surprise. The EMP devices worked as intended. They could disable the enemy's systems long enough for the Shadowhawks to deliver a devastating blow. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. At dawn, the Shadow Falcon slipped into the Zorothian system, undetected. The crew moved silently, their faces taut with focus. Brian stood on the bridge, watching as the enemy fleet grew larger on the screens. His voice was calm but firm as he gave the order. "Deploy the EMPs. Let's make this count." The EMP devices were launched in quick succession, glowing orbs of energy that streaked toward the Zorothian ships. When they detonated, a wave of electromagnetic pulses swept through the area, disabling engines, shields, and communication systems. For a brief moment, the enemy fleet was paralyzed, floating helplessly in space. "Now," Ryan shouted. Shadow Falcon surged forward, followed by a squadron of smaller attack ships. Plasma cannons roared to life, sending bolts of searing energy into the heart of the Zorothian armada. Explosions lit up the darkness, each blast tearing apart hulls and scattering debris across the void. Back on Earth, Laura Bennett watched the live feed from the command center, her breath catching as the first reports came in. "They did it," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "They actually did it." General Hayes nodded, his eyes glued to the screen. "It's not over yet. They'll regroup. But this buys us time and sends a message." The victory was short-lived. Within hours, news of the attack reached the Galactic Council, sparking outrage among its members. Admiral Cale Vorn, the reptilian leader who had overseen Daniel Carter's execution, slammed his fist onto the council table. "This is an act of war," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Humanity must be eradicated, completely." Other council members agreed, their expressions grim. What had started as a minor conflict had escalated into something far more dangerous. Humanity had proven itself unpredictable, willing to take extreme measures to protect itself. The council knew they couldn't afford to underestimate them again. Orders were issued, fleets mobilized, and resources redirected. The council began assembling an armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a massive force designed to crush Earth once and for all. Ships from dozens of alien species converged on a single point, forming a deadly spear aimed directly at humanity's heart, On Earth, celebrations were muted. While the success of the first strike boosted morale, everyone understood that the real fight was just beginning. Laura called an emergency meeting with her top advisors, including General Hayes and Dr. Emily Walsh. The mood in the room was somber, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. We hit them hard. But they're coming back harder, Laura said, pacing back and forth. What's our next move? Emily cleared her throat. We've made some progress on the quantum singularity weapon. If we can get it operational, it might be able to destabilize their entire fleet. But it's still experimental. We don't know if it will work. Hayes frowned. Experimental or not, we need every tool we can get. How long until it's ready? At least 2 weeks, Emily replied. Maybe 3. Laura sighed. That's too long. We need to buy ourselves more time. Ryan Scott's voice crackled over the comms link. Can launch another strike, hit their supply lines, disrupt their logistics, keep them off balance. Laura nodded. Do it, but be careful. Can't afford to lose you out there. As preparations continued, tensions on Earth reached a boiling point. Senator Andrew Meyer held another press conference, this time accusing Laura and her team of plunging humanity into a suicidal war. How many lives are we willing to sacrifice for this madness? He demanded, pointing a finger at the camera. The Council has already shown us their power. Why are we throwing away our future for revenge? His words resonated with many, especially those who had lost loved ones in the chaos following the declaration of war. Protests erupted in major cities, with crowds chanting slogans like "Peace Now" and "Save Our Planet." Some even called for Laura's resignation, claiming she was leading humanity to ruin. Laura refused to back down. In a fiery speech, broadcast worldwide, she addressed the growing unrest head-on. I understand your fear, she said, her voice steady but passionate. But surrender is not an option. The Council sees us as weak, as expendable. We give in now, they will destroy us without hesitation. This fight isn't just about survival, it's about proving that we deserve a place among the stars. Her words struck a chord with many, reigniting the spirit of defiance that had fueled humanity's initial response. Still, the divisions ran deep, and the pressure on Laura only intensified. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Monroe awaited her fate in a secure detention facility. Her betrayal had been exposed, and the damage she caused was significant. Classified information about Earth strategies had reached the Council, giving them valuable insight into humanity's plans. Interrogators questioned Lisa relentlessly, trying to uncover the full extent of her involvement. She cooperated fully, revealing everything she knew in exchange for protection for her family. When asked why she had done it, her answer was simple: I didn't have a choice. Laura visited Lisa personally, standing outside her cell and staring at the woman through the glass. You betrayed us, Laura said, her voice cold. You put billions of lives at risk. Lisa looked up, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But please, keep my daughter safe. Laura hesitated, then nodded. She'll be protected. But you'll face justice for what you've done. As the days passed, Earth prepared for the inevitable. Assault. Cities were evacuated, with millions of people relocated to underground bunkers and remote colonies. Factories worked around the clock, producing weapons, ships, and supplies. Scientists raced to complete the quantum singularity weapon, knowing it might be their only hope in orbit. The planetary defense grid took shape, a network of satellites armed with plasma cannons and missile launchers. It wasn't perfect, but it would provide a thin layer of protection against the incoming armada. Laura stood in the command center, gazing at the holographic map of Earth and its surroundings. The red dots representing the Council's fleet grew closer with each passing hour. She turned to General Hayes, her expression resolute. Are we ready? Hayes met her gaze. As ready as we'll ever be, Laura nodded. Then let's show them what happens when you mess with Earth. Far above, aboard the Council's flagship, Admiral Cale Vorn studied the image of Earth displayed on his view screen. The blue-green planet looked peaceful, almost inviting. But Vorn knew better. Beneath its serene surface lay a species determined. To fight to the bitter end, they think they can resist us. He sneered, addressing his officers. They think they can win. Show them how wrong they are. The order was given, and the Armada accelerated toward Earth. Billions of lives hung in the balance as the two forces hurtled toward collision. Humanity's fate rested on the courage of its warriors, the ingenuity of its scientists, and the strength of its resolve. For better or worse, the galaxy would soon witness the true power of the human spirit. The Council's armada loomed like a storm cloud over Earth, its countless ships blotting out the stars. On the surface, humanity braced for impact. Cities lay silent, their streets empty, except for the occasional patrol of soldiers ensuring order. Underground bunkers buzzed with activity as families huddled together, praying for survival. Above it all, the planetary defense grid stood ready, its weapons primed and waiting. Laura Bennett stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the monitors displaying real-time updates from space. The red dots representing the Council's fleet had grown so numerous they seemed to form a solid wall. How long? She asked quietly, her voice betraying none of the fear churning inside her. Less than 24 hours, replied General Hayes, his tone clipped but steady. He glanced at the holographic map hovering above the central table. Their vanguard will reach us first. If we can hold them off long enough, it might buy us time for the singularity weapon. Dr. Emily Walsh entered the room, her face pale. But determined, she carried a tablet displaying schematics of the quantum singularity device. We've finished the final calibrations, she said, handing the device to Laura. It's operational. But I need to be there when it's deployed. It's too complex for anyone else to handle. Laura hesitated, sending Emily into the heart of battle was risky, but she knew the scientist was right. Without her expertise, the weapon might fail, or worse, backfire. All right, Laura said finally. But you'll have an escort. Colonel Scott will lead the mission. Emily nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the tablet. Understood. Colonel Ryan Scott received the orders while aboard the Shadow Falcon. When he heard about the singularity weapon, he felt a mix of hope and dread. Hope because it might turn the tide of the war. Dread because deploying it would mean flying directly into the teeth of the Council's fleet. Ryan gathered his team in the briefing room. The Shadowhawks sat in silence, their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. This is it, Ryan began, pacing slowly in front of them. We're going in deep. Our job is to plant the singularity device on the Council's flagship. If we succeed, we cripple their entire operation. If we fail, he let the sentence hang, knowing no one needed him to finish it. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez raised her hand. Sir, what are our chances? Ryan met her gaze. Slim, but slim isn't zero. We've trained for this. We know how to adapt. But we're not doing this alone, he gestured to Emily, who stood nearby. Dr. Walsh will guide us every step of the way. Trust her, follow orders, and stay sharp. The team nodded, resolve hardening their expressions. They didn't need speeches or pep talks, they just needed to know they weren't giving up. Back on Earth, Senator Andrew Meyer continued his campaign against the war effort. In interviews and public appearances, he argued that further resistance was futile. Look at the sky, he shouted during one rally. Do you see those ships? It's the end of us if we keep fighting. Surrender now while we still can. His words sparked heated debates across the globe. Some agreed with him, believing humanity couldn't win against such overwhelming odds. Others saw his stance as cowardly, a betrayal of everything Earth stood for. Protests erupted outside government buildings, with citizens shouting slogans ranging from no more bloodshed to fight to the last breath. Laura watched the chaos unfold on the news, her frustration mounting. She called Rachel Moore, her assistant, into her office. What's the latest on internal dissent? She asked, leaning forward in her chair. Senator Meyer's gaining. Traction, Rachel replied, placing a folder on Laura's desk. Some military units are questioning orders. Supplies are being delayed in certain regions due to protests. We clenched her fists. We don't have time for this. Second, spent arguing is a second wasted. Rachel hesitated before asking, do you think we should address the nation again? Maybe try to unify people? Laura sighed. I'll do it, but I'm not sure how much good it'll do. People are scared. Fear makes them irrational. That evening, Laura delivered another speech, this time addressing both the public and the council directly. Standing before cameras in the command center, she spoke with unwavering conviction. To the people of Earth, I know you're afraid. I am too. But fear doesn't define us. Our courage does. To the Galactic Council, you've underestimated us once.
Ow.
Don't make that mistake again. Humanity fights not just to survive, but to prove that we belong among the stars. Her words resonated with many, reigniting the spirit of defiance that had driven humanity to fight in the first place. Still, divisions remained, and the pressure on Laura only grew heavier as the Council's fleet approached. Admiral Cale Vorn prepared for what he believed would be humanity's final stand. His flagship, the Eclipse, served as the nerve center of the Armada. Around him, officers relayed updates and coordinates, their voices tense but focused. Vorn stared at the image of Earth on his view screen, a sneer curling his lips. "They think they can resist us?" he muttered. "Pathetic creatures. Let them burn." He turned to his second-in-command, a tall alien with translucent skin and glowing veins. "Prepare the bombardment sequence. Once we break through their defenses, reduce their cities to ash." The officer bowed slightly. "As you command, Admiral." Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Monroe awaited her fate in detention. Her confession had revealed critical details about the Council's plans, including their strategy for breaching Earth's defenses. Interrogators pressed her for more information, but she had nothing left to give. "I told you everything," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Please, don't let my daughter suffer for my mistakes." Laura visited Lisa one last time before the Council's attack. "Your intel has been helpful," Laura admitted, standing outside the cell. "But your betrayal cost us dearly." Lisa looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'll carry that guilt forever. Just protect her, please." Laura studied her for a moment, then nodded. "She'll be safe. But justice must still be served." Hours later, the battle began. The Council's vanguard clashed with Earth's planetary defense grid, unleashing a torrent of plasma bolts and missiles. Explosions lit up the atmosphere as satellites fired back, taking down enemy ships one by one. Despite their efforts, the sheer size of the Council's fleet overwhelmed the defenses, forcing humanity to fall back. In orbit, Colonel Ryan Scott led the Shadowhawks toward the Eclipse. Cloaked in stealth technology, the Shadow Falcon slipped past enemy patrols, inching closer to its target. Inside, tension gripped the crew as they prepared to deploy the Singularity weapon. "We're in range," Ryan announced, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "Dr. Walsh, begin activation sequence." Emily worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls of the device. Initializing core, stabilizing energy flow. Almost there. Suddenly alarms blared. "We've been detected," shouted Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Enemy fighters incoming." Ryan barked orders, his mind racing. "Hold them off. We're not leaving until this thing is planted." The Shadow Falcon rocked violently as enemy fire struck its shields. Soldiers scrambled to man turrets, returning fire with precision. Explosions flared as drones swarmed the enemy fighters, buying precious seconds. "Core is stable," Emily cried. "Planting now." With a final keystroke, she activated the deployment mechanism. The Singularity device detached from the ship and latched onto the hull of the Eclipse. Ryan didn't wait to confirm success. "Get us out of here," he ordered. The Shadow Falcon surged forward, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. Behind them, the Eclipse shuddered as the Singularity device began destabilizing its structure. Admiral Gorn stared in horror as alarms screamed throughout his flagship. "What is happening?" demanded. An officer stammered. "Unknown energy source detected. Systems failing. Gravitational distortions increasing." Before anyone could react, the device detonated, creating a massive rupture in spacetime. The Eclipse imploded, dragging nearby ships into the void. Chaos erupted as the Council's fleet scrambled to regroup. On Earth, the effects were immediate. Monitors in the command center displayed the destruction of the Council's flagship, sending shockwaves through the remaining armada. Cheers erupted. Among the staff, But Laura remained somber. "It's not over yet," she said firmly. "They'll retaliate. Be ready." Despite the victory, humanity knew the war was far from won. The Council's forces were vast and their resolve unshaken. But for the first time since the conflict began, Earth had struck a blow that sent a clear message. Humanity would not go quietly into the night, far above. Amidst the wreckage of the eclipse, Admiral Cale Vorn floated in the void, his body battered, but alive. Rage burned in his eyes as he watched the remnants of his fleet retreat. "This isn't over," he whispered. "Not by a long shot." Humanity had proven itself resilient, resourceful, and willing to fight for its survival. The galaxy was vast, and the road ahead promised to be long and bloody. For now, though Earth could breathe a little easier, the aftermath of the eclipse's destruction was a mixture of relief and dread. The Council's flagship, once the symbol of their dominance, had been reduced to floating debris in the void of space. For a brief moment, humanity allowed itself to feel hope. The singularity weapon had worked better than anyone could have imagined. But that hope was fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. Everyone knew it wouldn't last. In the command center on Earth, Laura Bennett watched. As updates poured in from orbit, the Council's fleet had scattered after the loss of the eclipse, retreating to regroup. It was a victory, but a costly one. The planetary defense grid had been severely damaged, leaving Earth vulnerable if the enemy returned. Supplies were running low and morale among the troops was beginning to waver. "We need to act quickly," Laura said, turning to General Hayes. "If they come back stronger, we won't survive another attack." Hayes nodded grimly. "Agreed. But we're stretched thin. Our forces are exhausted and resources are almost gone." Laura clenched her fists. She hated feeling powerless, but the reality was undeniable. Humanity had gambled everything on the singularity weapon, and while it had paid off, they couldn't rely on such miracles again. They needed a new plan, one that didn't depend solely on brute force. "Dr. Emily?" Walsh sat in a makeshift lab aboard the Shadow Falcon, her hands trembling as she reviewed data from the singularity device. Despite its success, she couldn't shake the fear that something had gone wrong. The weapon had destabilized space-time in ways no one fully understood. What if it caused unforeseen consequences? What if it created a rift that could destroy entire star systems? "Are you okay?" Ryan Scott asked, stepping into the lab. His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Emily looked up, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about what happens next." Ryan leaned against the wall. "We got lucky this time. But luck doesn't last forever." "No," Emily agreed. "It doesn't." She hesitated before adding, "I'm scared, Ryan. Not just for us, for everyone. What if we can't stop them?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the room and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find a way. We always do." His words brought little comfort, but Emily appreciated the effort. She turned back to her work, determined to make sure humanity had every advantage possible, even if it meant risking her own life again. On Earth, the cracks within humanity's ranks deepened. Senator Andrew Meyer seized the opportunity to push his agenda even harder. In televised interviews, he argued that the destruction of the eclipse proved nothing except how close humanity was to annihilation. "We struck a blow, yes," he admitted during one debate. "But at what cost? How many more lives will we sacrifice before we admit defeat?" His opponents fired back, accusing him of undermining the war effort. Protests erupted across the globe, with citizens divided between those who supported continued resistance and those who wanted peace at any price. Cities that had once stood united now felt fractured, their streets filled with tension and uncertainty. Laura addressed the growing unrest in another speech, her tone firmer than ever. "To the people of Earth," she began, standing before cameras in the command center, "I know there is fear. I know there is doubt. But let me remind you of one thing. We are still here. Against all odds, we are still fighting. Surrender is not an option, not when our survival is at stake." Her words resonated with some, but others dismissed them as empty rhetoric. Senator Meyer countered with a fiery rebuttal, calling Laura's leadership reckless and dangerous. "She's leading us to extinction," he shouted during a press conference. "Is that what we want? To die for pride?" The arguments raged on, threatening to tear humanity apart from within. Laura knew she couldn't afford distractions. Not with the council regrouping, but addressing the dissent directly only seemed to make things worse. She confided in Rachel Moore, her assistant, late one night in her office. "I don't know how much longer we can hold this together," Laura admitted, rubbing her temples. "Half the planet wants to fight, and the other half wants to surrender. How do we move forward when we're pulling in two different directions?" Rachel hesitated before responding. Maybe you focus on the ones who believe in you, the fighters. Let them carry the rest." Laura considered this. It wasn't ideal, but it might be the only way to keep the war effort alive. Nodded slowly. "All right, we focus on the believers, and we pray it's enough." Meanwhile, Admiral Cale Vorn floated in an escape pod, his body battered but alive. Rescue ships eventually recovered him, bringing him back to the remnants of the Council's fleet. When he arrived, his fury was palpable. He stormed onto the bridge of a temporary command ship, his eyes blazing with hatred. "They think they've won," he snarled, slamming his fist onto the table. "They think they can defy us. Show them how wrong they are." The council convened an emergency meeting, their expressions grave. The loss of the eclipse had been a devastating blow, both strategically and symbolically. Humanity had proven itself capable of inflicting serious damage, and the council knew they couldn't afford another miscalculation. "What is your plan?" asked one member, a being made entirely of shifting light. Vorn's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We adapt, we evolve, and we crush them." Orders were issued to reorganize the fleet, fortify remaining ships, and develop countermeasures against humanity's weapons. Intelligence reports revealed weaknesses in Earth's defenses, particularly in areas where internal dissent had weakened military coordination. The Council saw an opportunity to exploit these fractures, targeting regions most likely to surrender. Back on Earth, Colonel Ryan Scott prepared for the next phase of the war. The Shadowhawks had returned to base, their ship damaged but operational. Repairs were underway, but Ryan knew they couldn't afford to rest for long. The Council would strike again and soon. He gathered his team in the briefing room there, faces lined with exhaustion but still resolute. "Listen up," Ryan began, pacing slowly. "The Council isn't done with us. They'll come back stronger, faster, and angrier. We need to hit them before they recover." Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez raised her hand. "Sir, how?" "We barely survived the last mission." Orion stopped pacing and met her gaze. "Because we're smarter than they think. Because we're willing to risk everything to protect what matters. And because if we don't fight, no one else will." The team nodded, determination hardening their expressions. They didn't need promises of victory, they just needed purpose. And Ryan gave them that. As preparations continued, Captain Lisa Monroe faced justice for her betrayal. A tribunal convened to determine her fate. With Laura presiding over the proceedings, Lisa stood before the panel, her head bowed, knowing there was no defense for what she had done. "You betrayed your species," Laura said, her voice cold. "You put billions of lives at risk. Do you have anything to say?" Lisa looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I did what I had to do to protect my family. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Please, don't let my daughter pay for my mistakes." Laura studied her for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Your daughter will be protected, but your actions cannot go unpunished.
I won't.
You will serve your sentence, and you will live with the consequences of your choices." Lisa nodded, her shoulders sagging with relief and guilt. As guards led her away, Laura turned to Rachel. "Make sure her family is safe. If she's telling the truth about why she did it, at least her daughter deserves a chance." Days turned into weeks as humanity braced for the Council's next move. Factories churned out weapons and supplies. Scientists worked tirelessly to improve existing technology, and soldiers trained for battles yet to come. Earth was battered but unbroken, its people clinging to hope even as fear gnawed at their resolve. In orbit, The remnants of the Council's fleet regrouped, their numbers smaller, but their resolve stronger than ever. Admiral Vorn stared at the image of Earth on his view screen, his hatred burning brighter than the stars. "This ends now," he vowed. "No more games, no more mercy." Far below, Laura stood in the command center, gazing at the same stars through reinforced windows. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: humanity wouldn't give up without a fight. Whatever happened next, Earth would face it head-on. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the final chapter of this conflict to unfold. The final days of the war were a blur of desperation and determination. Earth's skies burned with streaks of fire as humanity prepared for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle. The Council's fleet, now fully regrouped, and more aggressive than ever, descended upon the planet like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. For both sides, there could be no turning back. Laura Bennett stood in the command center, her face pale but resolute. Around her, officers moved quickly, their voices tense as they relayed updates from space. The monitors displayed the Council's armada, thousands of ships stretching across the horizon, their weapons glowing ominously in the darkness of space. It was a sight that made even the bravest soldiers shiver. "We've done everything we can," General Hayes said quietly, standing beside Laura. "Now it's up to them." Laura nodded, her eyes fixed on the screens. "Tell the troops to hold their ground. Every second counts." Colonel Ryan Scott led the Shadow Hawks into battle once again, this time aboard a newly repaired Shadow Falcon. The ship was sleek and fast, designed to outmaneuver the Council's larger vessels. Inside, the crew worked in silence, their faces grim as they prepared for what might be their last mission. Ryan addressed his team in the briefing room, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is it," he said, pacing slowly. "The Council thinks they've got us cornered. They think we're weak. Let's show them how wrong they are." Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez spoke up, her voice firm. "What's the plan, sir?" Ryan pointed to a holographic map hovering above. "The table will hit their supply lines first, disrupt their logistics, weaken their forces. Then we make our way to Admiral Vorn's new flagship. If we take him out, we break their chain of command." The team nodded, their expressions hardening with resolve. They didn't need speeches or promises, they just needed a chance to fight. As the battle began, chaos erupted in orbit. Plasma bolts streaked through space, lighting up the void with flashes of blinding light. Earth's remaining defense satellites fired relentlessly, taking down enemy ships one by one. But the Council's numbers were overwhelming, and their technology far superior. Despite humanity's best efforts, the tide of the battle seemed to be turning against them. On the surface, cities trembled under the weight of orbital bombardments. Buildings crumbled, streets filled with smoke, and millions fled to underground bunkers. The destruction was catastrophic, but humanity refused to give up. Soldiers fought with everything they had, holding the line even as the odds stacked higher and higher in the command center. Laura watched the carnage unfold on the monitors. Her heart ached for the lives being lost, but she couldn't afford to let emotion cloud her judgment. "Keep the defenses active," she ordered. "Every second buys us time." General Hayes stepped closer, his voice low. "Laura, if this doesn't work, we need to consider evacuating as many people as possible." Laura shook her head. "Not yet. Not until we've tried everything." Aboard the Shadow Falcon, Ryan and his team pushed deeper into enemy territory, cloaked in stealth technology. The ship slipped past patrols and launched precision strikes on key targets. Explosions lit up the darkness as supply depots and communication hubs were destroyed, forcing the Council's fleet to slow its advance. But the mission came at a cost. Enemy fighters swarmed the Shadow Falcon, peppering it with plasma bolts. Shields flickered dangerously low, and alarms blared throughout the ship. "We can't keep this up much longer," shouted Maria, manning one of the turrets. "Stay focused," Ryan barked, gripping the controls tightly. "We're almost there." Finally, they reached Admiral Vorn's flagship, a massive vessel, bristling with weapons and surrounded by escorts. Ryan turned to Emily Walsh, who sat nearby monitoring the Singularity device. "Are you ready?" he asked. Emily nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "Ready as I'll ever be." With a final burst of speed, the Shadow Falcon broke through the escort ships and latched onto the flagship's hull. Ryan's team deployed, securing the area while Emily planted the device. "Initializing core," she muttered, her fingers flying over the controls. "Stabilizing energy flow." Admiral Vorn, alerted to the intrusion, stormed onto the bridge of his ship. "Find them," he roared, his voice shaking with rage. "Destroy them before they finish." Enemy soldiers poured into the corridors, engaging the Shadowhawks in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Ryan fought with relentless determination, his weapon blazing as he cleared a path for Emily. "Hurry," he shouted. "I'm almost done," Emily replied, sweat dripping down her face. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, a squad of council soldiers appeared, pinning them down with heavy fire. Ryan and Maria returned fire, their movements precise and deadly. "I've got your back," Maria yelled, taking out 2 enemies with a single shot. "Core stabilized," Emily cried. "Planting now." With a final keystroke, she activated the deployment mechanism. The Singularity device detached from her equipment and fused itself to the flagship's reactor. Emily grabbed Ryan's arm. "We need to go. Now." The Shadow Falcon pulled away. The Singularity device detonated, creating a massive rupture in space-time. The flagship imploded, dragging nearby ships into the void. Admiral Vorn, caught in the chaos, screamed in fury as his vessel disintegrated. Around him, the shockwave rippled through the Council's fleet, disabling countless ships and scattering survivors. On Earth, the effects were immediate. Monitors in the command center showed the Council's forces retreating, their formation broken and morale shattered. Cheers erupted among the staff, but Laura remained silent.
Ow.
Her eyes fixed on the screens. "It's over," General Hayes said softly. Placing a hand on her shoulder, Laura nodded, but her expression was somber. For now, the Council's retreat marked the end of the war, but the cost had been immense. The cities lay in ruins, millions were dead or displaced, and Earth's resources were nearly depleted. Yet, amidst the devastation, there was a sense of hope. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before, and they had always found a way to rebuild. Laura addressed the world from the command center, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today we have proven that humanity cannot be broken," she declared. "We have shown the galaxy that we are not just survivors, we are fighters. From this day forward, we will rebuild not just our planet but our future, and we will do so not as victims but as equals." Her words resonated across the globe, sparking celebrations in bunkers and colonies alike. People hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces as they realized they had survived the unthinkable. Weeks later, Earth began the long process of recovery. Factories reopened, producing materials needed to repair infrastructure. Scientists worked tirelessly to develop sustainable solutions, ensuring that humanity would never again find itself so vulnerable. Leaders from every nation came together to form a new global alliance, united in their determination to prevent such a conflict from happening again. Laura visited a memorial erected in honor of Daniel, Carter, and all those who had died during the war. She placed a flower at the base of the monument and whispered, "Thank you for giving us the strength to keep fighting." Far away in the depths of space, remnants of the Council's fleet drifted aimlessly, their leaders defeated and humiliated. Admiral Vorn, presumed dead but secretly rescued by loyalists, vowed revenge. "This isn't over," he muttered, staring at the distant glow of Earth. Not by a long shot, but for now, the galaxy was quiet. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through submission, but through resilience and courage. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Earth was ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond, and somewhere amid the wreckage, a new dawn began to rise for humanity, for the galaxy, and for the future.